Hey everyone, welcome back to Fire Chicken Review. Today we're getting right into it. We're going to be talking about some controversies within the Keyforge community, and that is with Ghost Galaxy announcing the official competitive formats for the game in their newest update, and talking about the Keyforge Celebration event. So if you're very interested in that and have side on opinions, I'm going to try to go into it. So if you didn't get the update, basically what it's saying is, hey, we're going to be celebrating the Keyforge in Minnesota from the 11th to 13th, and I'll talk more about that. And then they talk about the official formats for the game. So, what are the official formats, and why is there some controversy? Well, we're going to talk about that. There is now going to be three formats: Sealed, Archon, and Alliance, and all other formats currently are not in the game. But the biggest thing to talk about was that this was posted on the 6th of October, so just a couple of days ago, and they're saying that these are preliminary because there's already been some negative feedback for these, and they said, hey, we want to test this at the celebration event, which I'll show here, and that they may change their mind before the 31st of December. And the reason why this is also impacting is that people within the campaign that raised over $1 million for Winds of Exchange have some concern about it. So I'll dive into all three and talk about the last one here, Second Amber. So basically, what is happening with Sealed was Sealed had a variety of different formats, but a lot of the competitive formats, especially during the Vault tours, was that you either bought one, two, or three Sealed decks, and you would have the matches. What they're bringing here now is they're saying that you need to buy two Sealed decks, and basically they're bringing in a constructed format for Sealed, saying that before a match begins, you can take the different houses and you can swap them out to basically make a sealed deck to your liking, and to potentially avoid houses that you may not prefer, or finding that a house has cards that you don't like. And so this is already causing some controversy because this brings in a type of deck construction that we haven't seen in Keyforge before. But this reminds me of two things, and people will say Soulforge first because they take two half decks in that game, but it also reminds me of Star Wars: The Living Card Game, where you had pods of cards and you put that together to make a deck. So this is Sealed, and we'll talk about how this is related to Alliance in a little bit. And also, what's interesting about all three formats is that Swiss is no longer a thing. For those that don't know what Swiss was, a Swiss tournament was basically you had X amount of matches, let's say five matches, and your score was based off of your strength against your opponent. So the better your opponents did, the better of the score you did. Basically, if you won all your matches, you were going to win the event, or you would at least do very well in day one, automatically go into day two. And there was some controversy with that aspect. Not controversy, there was concerns throughout the years of that what Swiss didn't bring was that if your opponents left because they said, hey, I lost four of my matches, I'm not going to do the last match, that hurt your strength of score. But that's getting more into Swiss. So they said, hey, let's bring in double elimination, basically, which means that if you now lose two matches in the competitive tournament, whether that's Sealed, Alliance, or Archon, you're now eliminated from that tournament. But there's what's called a second Amber event. Basically, you go down to a loser's bracket, with to say it politely, and within that, you'll see what the second Amber is all about. I do have some concerns with it, and I'll try to share that more at the end, because they're saying that they're going to elimination until there's only 8 players left, which means that I have questions about are we going to see what Fantasy Flight used to do in other games as well, where you would have top 16, top 32, because now we're saying, oh, basically only the top 8 are going to make it to day 2. So I'm wondering, is there still going to be a scoring system? But more on that. Basically, Sealed is now 2 Sealed decks, so it's raising the initial cost. And remember, MSRP is also raised from basically 10 US dollars to $12.99 or $13. So now they're saying that you need to spend $26 versus 10 if they're selling it at that rate, plus the cost of the tournament. So that's a little bit more money than people used to spend on that. So we'll have to see how people feel about that, and hopefully that doesn't make less people show up for the Sealed. So I'll talk a little bit more later on. And then we have Archon. Archon has also changed into the aspect that there was various Archon levels that you can enter. Now you have to bring 3 Keyforge decks, and the same thing that they're going to go to double elimination rounds until there's only 8 players left. And what's going to be interesting is at the start of every match, you and your opponent will look at the 3 decks and say, "Ooh, that one's a bit too spicy. I don't want to play against that deck." So you eliminate a deck that you don't have to play on against. So there's going to be a little bit of controversy with this. I've played the different formats where people chose a deck to remove. When I played it, it was in like a sealed, so they could only see what houses were in that deck. And the issue is that known players, like even like myself, we have certain decks for these high level events that are very well known with us, that we've played it hundreds and hundreds of times. So it's basically going to be unfortunate because there's going to be decks that we love at these high level events that people are going to automatically say, no, don't want to play against that. Or even with outside of a couple of rounds, you may have people that say, hey, they're going to they're going to do what's called scouting. If they're part of groups and say, hey, I just played Dom, and yeah, he had a really good deck. Make sure you eliminate X deck. So there's more to come from this, so we'll have to see. But basically, you bring 3 decks, your opponent brings 3 decks, they eliminate one. But after your first match, there's this thing about exhausted deck. It says after the first elimination round, any deck that won the prior round is exhausted, and as a consequence, is not ready and cannot be used for this. So what this is going to happen is that basically, because it's double elimination, what this really means, outside of losing one match, because you can only lose one match and then you're eliminated, because after the second one you're out, is that you win with a deck, and that was a spicy deck. Now, when you go to your next opponent, especially if you have a really well-known deck, or even if you don't, your opponent is always going to choose the deck for you, because you only have 2 decks left, right? If you both won, unless, and this is if talking about the people that continue to win. So if you both won, that means that your opponent is going to choose a deck, and now, because you only have the 2 remaining there, so you just get whatever is left over, because one deck is exhausted. So you present the 2, your opponent chooses one, and so now you're basically, your opponent is choosing which deck they want to face against you, and you're doing the same. So what's going to happen is that you're simultaneously going to reveal, and you're doing that, which is going to be frustrating, because there's going to be, again, this leads to some decks that won't see play, and this is a competitive level. So I do hope they bring on just pure Archon of a single Archon deck. I understand what they're doing here, and I'm curious to see, and let me know in the comments if you think the double elimination is a better process or just a different process than Swiss. And then what's interesting about the playoff rounds is that they said basically the top 8, and this is where it's going to be make the game a little bit longer, is that the top 8 are going to be randomly selected to face off each other, but it's going to be best of 3, so they gotta win 2 matches, which is going to be most likely extensively longer than the day 1, basically, because this would be like day 2 event stuff. You can have it all in the same day, but having like 5 or 6 matches, and then having at least like what 2, 4, 6 matches type of thing, because you have your top 8, your top 4, and then your top 2. So that's at least 6 more matches. Is going to be interesting for that. And they talk about the exhausted decks. Uh, so a deck that has won a playoff match is exhausted for the remainder of the playoff, and therefore cannot be used again in the current tournament. Results at the end of the tournament, the 2 finalists will have to play against each other off of their 3 decks once during the playoffs. So that's kind of interesting aspect for the exhaustion, because it's once you lose the top, that's what's going to happen. So very curious. Let me know what you think about the Archon one. And then we have Alliance. So Alliance is the new one, and it says the Alliance format challenge just not only a player's skill, but also their deck construction. And this is where a lot of Keyforge players in the community say, what? Deck construction in Keyforge. So this is where I want to go on a little bit of a side tangent. This is where the controversy is coming from. This is where the game found campaign Discord communities, social media, Facebook, all these different things. We're having a divide because a lot of players within the Keyforge community do not want to see deck construction. And my own bias of view is I'm not a massive fan of deck construction. Within this game, because I come to play the game, I just want to bring a deck, I just want to buy a seal deck, but I understand that this was one of the ways that Ghost Galaxy is potentially looking at, and remember it's under review, to say, hey, all those awful decks that people got, or they said that they're bad decks, maybe one or two of the houses are super good, but that third one isn't, so this is where Alliance comes in. Basically, and exactly how I said Star Wars, a living card game, had pods, they even call it a house pod. So borrowing again from that Star Wars LCG model, and basically because a lot of the people came from Fantasy Flight that now work at Ghost Galaxy, it makes sense that they're talking about pod because it's also just a pod of cards, of 12 cards, right? And what's happening here is that one Keyforge Alliance deck consists of 3 house pods recruited from a player's collection of Archon decks. So you can choose. What's interesting is that you can choose just to bring a single deck and you don't take anything apart, or you can choose to bring 3 decks from 3 separate. Sorry, 3 pods from 3 separate decks, and those could even be from 3 separate sets. So this allows for a lot of variability and a lot of interesting plays. And this is deck construction. This is purely what it is. The only unfortunate and the negative aspect that we have here is that the first 5 sets were play tested, were reviewed to be used just with that set. What I mean by that is that the pool of cards, the 250 plus cards per set usually, they were all play tested to say how well does this do if you had these cards connected with just the set, and also how well could it do against other sets in after we got past Coda, right? Like how well could it counter a different set? But they were never meant to have basically like 20 up to 24 anomalies, up to 24 mavericks, legacy cards, etc. If that doesn't make sense, what I'm saying is that because these decks had a pool of cards, now we're saying that the whole gamma of cards are available, and there's going to be combinations that some people are going to find broken, or it's going to potentially win in 1 or 2 turns, and that's a scary thought that some community members have, and so what's leading to is some disgruntlement about construction that people already dislike, right? Potentially that's how the format's going to go, or maybe no one brings it. It depends on how competitive people are, but this is one of the 3 premier competitive formats, so people are going to try to bring their most what I call quote unquote janky decks, because they want to have decks that are going to win fast and are extremely good, right? Now, the other negative I have about this as well in the constructive format is that Richard Garfield and Fantasy Flight Games, when they're making this game at the time, Richard Garfield's idea when he was looking at Keyforge was he said that he wanted people to play with their bad cards. So he wants you to have your deck, and it's a unique deck. No one else has it. And he wants you to say, hey, uh, when you're playing with this, like one of my favorite bad cards, for example, is Untamed card. I was about to call it a Mars card. That's called a Common Cold. And it says it's an action, deal 1 damage to all creatures in play. No big deal. Or destroy all Mars creatures, because hey, the Common Cold kills a Mars creature. Very hilarious card. Most of the time, unless someone's playing a Mars, it's not only going to do a minimal amount of damage, but if your opponent has this massive Mars board, all of a sudden you have that feels good moment that this card has done something super useful in your deck. And now that because even in Archon, you're bringing in 3 decks in the competitive format, maybe you'll never get to play the deck that you want. And in Alliance, you are going to most likely fall behind if you choose to only bring a single deck versus people crafting and doing deck construction, the chances of these lower tier cards, or not lower tier, but these cards that are not awful but situational, and a lot of the rare cards are more situational within Keyforge, but these situational cards will see less and less play, and some houses will see less and less play. Like, for example, Worlds Collide Brobnar is within the community of Keyforge, well known as being one of the weaker houses in the a set that had good cards, but Brobnar in that set was not that great. So that means that people will potentially choose their Worlds Collide decks and remove that Brobner and replace it for something else, which is unfortunate because now you're not playing with the deck at its fullest and trying all the different combos. And so that's why some people may have some disgruntlement with Alliance, on top of the fact that it's a deck construction, right? Everything else remains the same for elimination going to the top 8. I do hope that they see that if there's a lot of people showing up, like if you have 100 people showing up, that should go to the top 16, and hopefully they go away from a double elimination. Like, I know that the very last Vulture at Albany was a survivor mode, and when your deck lost, you couldn't use that deck anymore. They don't have to bring that back, but a 3 strikes you're out would be nicer than a 2 strikes, because I've gone on record and mentioned that I've gone to FFG Worlds a few times for a variety of other games, and yes, during day 1 event, I've lost twice, but still made day 2. And the reason why was that the people that I lost against ended up being the top person, and maybe like the 4th or 6th person. So I lost against people that were very highly competitive, and unluckily I got bad matchups. But on day 2, when I got a chance to do a rematch or got to paired up against other people, I did really well, came in top 8 or better type of thing, right? So anyhow, that's just talking about Swiss versus elimination format, but the playoff rounds, everything else is the same. Let me know in the comments what you think, and be gentle when you're talking about the alliance format. I know that it's a little bit of a taboo with deck construction. Some people are fairly excited about it, and I'll be linking a podcast I listened to talking about why they only see benefits within Alliance, and they're on the opposite end, so that you can, of me, that's to say, because I'm not a huge fan of Alliance, but I'm still willing to try it. And the person's podcast that I'm talking about here, they're very much a huge fan, and I think I have a link that I'll be showing here in a little bit. So those are the 3 formats. The Alliance one is the one that has everyone being split within the community. Remember that this is still preliminary. They're going to try it out at the celebration event. And my concern is actually less on the alliance. It's more on the sealed event basically being a form of alliance in my view, because it says right here in the sealed, you get to do pods of cards. And I want sealed to be my deck, whether it's good or bad, so that I can go to the event. And I'm actually against I should say here, constructively, I'm against when people say that, oh man, you're automatically going to lose. It's a gamble if you get a bad deck. And the reason why I say this is that one of the ways that you can change this is, sure, buy 2 or 3 sealed decks and choose whatever one that is the best for you. I remember that there was I think it was a regional event in Toronto at 401 Games. And I came top 4 in that event, and people thought I must have had the craziest sealed deck ever, and we had to buy 3 sealed decks, I remember at the time. But what it turned out after I scored all my decks using decks of Keyforge and the SAS was that none of my decks were above 70. I think my highest one was 65 SAS. Now, it was fair that the other top 3, all their decks were 70 plus, but none of mine were above 70. And for those that are not familiar with SAS and all that means is that there's a group of people that believe that if it scores X amount, it means that your deck is probably better. And for the most part, there's some truth into that. But what was interesting was that people were saying, oh, Dom, you must have such a great deck, blah, blah, blah. And I showed them, I was like, hey, with my SAS is telling me otherwise. And it's not because it's wrong, because I actually thought my decks were kind of on the bad side. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought there were some dead awful cards, and some of the houses were just saggy, and it was like, oh, this is going to be hard. But what I ended up doing is, because I'm known as a good Keyforge player, was that I knew the weaknesses of my decks, and I went around them by using the strengths of the decks, and I focus on maybe certain houses or certain combinations. And because I know the card pool from the set very well, because I play the game so much, I was able to beat a lot of competitive players and make it to the top four in all my matches. Even in my final match, I remember my opponent's hands were shaking because they were afraid that I was just going to destroy them. In my final match, I still did very well. So that's just to say that I think that I understand why people are concerned about sealed, and I'm still willing to try this format, but I would like to bring back traditional sealed, just because it would be fun. But this is still interesting. I just think it has too much overlap with Alliance sealed, and it really should just fall under that and bring us traditional, right? And so those are the three formats. And then talking about Second Amber really quick. The quick snap of this is that what Second Amber is that once you go into the loser brackets, every time you want to play in the match, your name gets entered into a draw, and you could potentially win multiple prizes. I hope that people go and talk about what they like and didn't like about this at the Keyforge Celebration event. Uh, to me, it's an okay experience. What I think is going to potentially happen is that when people get to the second Amber event, they're like, hey, I got double eliminate, I play a match, and then all of a sudden there's a lot less people that are doing the second Amber event, so you don't have as many people in the player field. And I just like that. Say you lost your two first matches and then you just killed it. You won your next like four or five. Sorry, when I say your first two matches, I mean in the official tournament. You go down to the second Amber and you win every single match within the second Amber. There's kind of a feels bad aspect that because it's a random draw, even though there's a higher percentage that your name's going to get drawn, you could potentially win none of the prizes and be like, oh, but I won every single match in the second Amber. I went 5 rounds and won every single one. I just had bad matchups in the main event, and I've won all these, but I don't get any type of prizes. It's just a random chance. That's an unfortunate aspect that I hope isn't seen. Um, so we'll have to see what happens, and hopefully some feedback, some constructive feedback from the second Amber helps to alleviate my concerns about it. But it's still an interesting aspect, and a lot of the times what this used to be was that you used to have side pods that once people were out of the main event, they would just go into these different pods and play up to like with 8 players type of thing. And so this is what Second Amber brings. My other constructive feedback is that it's going to waive how many people are playing, and I can see people playing like, oh, the prizes only look okay, and now they drop out, and so maybe you had a pool of 20 people, now you have 10 or 5. Uh, Ideally, the number should keep on going up because more people are getting out of the main event. But yeah, it's hard to say until I actually try it out. But it's an interesting idea. So that's that. And then I want to talk about the comments on the Keyforge campaign. You can see people saying, hey, please don't, when you say that you're going to be canceling your pledges. There's people really concerned about that. A lot of comments talking about Alliance. And I came on here and I said, hey, if you have concerns or you want to say pros, you can just make a hashtag called hashtag concerns. And you'll see that when I click on that, there's quite a few people, and there's other people giving thumbs up saying, yeah, I share these concerns. And it goes on for a while. And there is some lengthy posts that people are saying, like, hey, I backed this campaign. I did not think that this was going to be a constructive format because Keyforge never was. And so, because this came out, this idea, this information came out after the campaign closed, there's some disgruntlement within this. And this isn't necessarily all people that were already part of the Keyforge community. These are people that may be board gamers that said, hey, I'm going to get into Keyforge. I don't want to do construction. And now the new formats are saying that there is potentially construction. With this reminder that these are just preliminary, this isn't the final. but there's a lot of negative feedback, and there's some constructive feedback here as well. But yeah, it just goes on. So that I find interesting. So getting into the formats, where I got this from is that it's called keyforge.com, and they have some articles. And this one says, "Hey, we're going to be celebrating Keyforge on this date," and say, "Hey, here's the Keyforge celebration from November 11th to the 13th." Only sad note for me is that for me this is November 11th is Remembrance Day, and I believe that's Veterans Day in the U.S. So it's for a lot of people it's a long weekend. I get it, but obviously for myself because I'm going to be going to a ceremony on the 11th. I wouldn't be able to fly out until later on in the day, so that's unfortunate. I'm also a 17-hour drive and a fair airplane ride away. With the month's notice, I think mostly of it is going to be locals going. I don't think there's going to be as many international people, including myself, coming from Canada, just because it's not enough time and it's getting close to Christmas time. But that's not an issue here. Um, and they're saying that people are going to be able to get Unchained decks and a few other goodie bags. And so this is what it's going to be at the Game Center. And what this is that it's the old FFG center, and the events look like fire, to be honest. So for 75 US, you can enter all events. The only caveat is that the sealed events, like if I click on the sealed event, it's going to say that you have to pay additional $25. So MSRP is $13, so you're getting $1 off of the MSRP to buy sealed decks, right? So you're spending 75 to go into this sealed tournament. You're going to get two sealed decks, and let's see what type of decks are there. I can't remember. Uh, at the show, in return for which you will get two new Winds of Exchange. So wow, okay, you're gonna pay the 25 US. You're gonna get two Winds of Exchange, which leads to another round of a little bit of controversy, which I don't know if people picked up on this. Uh, if members are going to be getting two Winds of Exchange decks before, basically it's like a pre-release of Winds of Exchange, because Winds of Exchange is likely not to come out into Q1, Q2. I think it's supposed to be around Q1 of 2023. That means that the first people to get their hands on these decks will be people that go to the celebration event. Now, that also leads back to the campaign here and all these comments about the new formats and whatnot. What they may not have realized is that by doing this, it means that backers aren't going to be the first people to get the decks. And when I say, oh, they may not have realized, they're like, no, of course they realize. Well, a lot of people that back on crowdfunding campaigns, they expect that they're going to be the first, because this is technically a board game, is that they're going to be the first people to get their hands on the board game, the decks. And so to have this pre-release where people are going to be getting decks before backers that were the people that helped support and made sure that Keyforge was alive, it's going to cause some frustration. And I'll say full out here, I don't think there's any need for the actual frustration. I'm not concerned for myself. It's only a few decks. Like even if 100 people go out and they give out like 500 decks, it's just a few decks in the wild. But there's going to be some frustrations because depending on how long it takes for people to get their own decks, they're going to be seeing people playing the game and saying, "Hey, I backed the campaign," and maybe they back like myself at a high tier level and say, I'm kind of frustrated that I'm not getting the opportunity. So hopefully, maybe Ghost Galaxy does something in between, or maybe a few backers will get a chance to get the decks. And I get this. They're incentivizing people to go to the celebration, but what's it's causing is because a lot of locals will be able to go. It means that there's going to be some stuff that people can't get. And I also hope that what they do is that all the prizes here, I hope it's nothing too unique. I hope it's mostly just the Winds of Exchange decks, but nothing too unique in the aspect that there's no FOMO, because a lot of people, including myself, won't be able to make it. And because we can't see what the prizes are yet, and by the time they most likely will show the prize, it's probably closer to the date, a lot of people wouldn't be able to make it. But that's just a side note of my concerns for that. I think that a lot of these events look like fire. I would love to play in the Unchained event. The sealed event looks great. And they have some welcome notes, which I'll definitely be tuning into on the first day. They even have Keyforge Adventures, which I think a lot of casual people will be going to. And here's the FFG Center, now the Game Center here because it's been changed. And on the 12th, so the second day, they're going to have that Alliance tournament. And when I clicked on here earlier, yeah, only one person has pre-registered. You don't actually need to pre-register per se, but it is interesting that there isn't that much. I think for the sealed, there's also not too many people that registered yet. I think it is. I think it's around 11 people. Yeah, so not too many people have done that yet. All right, so that's what we got going on for that. And then I wanted to talk about some. Uh, there's a petition out for this. There's enough people that are frustrated with the new constructive format for Keyforge that they said, hey, please sign this petition. And they have 78 people that have signed it, and you have some testimonies from various people. So not to show all the names, you can, if people are interested, I can link this, but it's not too hard to find the petition. But yeah, people are fairly frustrated with a constructive format because Keyforge has never had it before. And so these people are saying, hey, we never requested this. And some people are saying that they would like their money back from the campaign if it goes ahead. And I know that others are saying, hey, that's kind of crazy. But you know what? I will fully admit, even myself, when I saw that there's going to be a constructed format, I thought for half a second, I was like, do I want to keep my pledge because I'm backing at 750 US, which is quite a bit of money. I'm getting 6 displays of Keyforge. Maybe I should change my mind and wait till it comes to retail. But that was only a half second because I love the game so much, and I understand that Ghost Galaxy is trying to do new things. So I said, oh, you know what? No worries on my end. But I could see the fire in people's eyes because I said, hey, construction is not something I want to do in Keyforge, and that's been the way for a very long time. That anytime people brought it up in the communities, people said, no, we don't want construction. So it's unfortunate that Ghost Galaxy didn't bring up with the community or during the campaign, which would have been much nicer, saying, "Hey, we're considering doing a constructive format." And if they did a poll of the actual backers saying, "Are you guys happy with a constructive format?" and the vote, I almost guarantee you would have been a split decision with a lot of people saying, "No, I don't want to do it." But I understand from a business perspective that it was smart not doing it because they most likely wouldn't have raised over $1 million. The only concern now, the pledge manager hasn't opened yet, is that now during the pledge manager, this may hurt sales in some ways, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe people will play and enjoy Alliance, and it actually increases sales. But I think a lot of people do think it's going to hurt the pledge manager's sales a little bit because people are going to want to hold off into retail, and also speaking of which, because you got something like a petition and you already have stores that are saying that, hey, I don't know if I want to hold Keyforge. I don't know how this is going to do for Ghost Galaxy and trying to talk to your actual brick and mortar game store saying, hey, do you want to host this game? And it's like, hey, my community is saying that you're bringing it constructed. They didn't want to play it. But this is again at the competitive level. So hopefully, when they're talking to the stores, a lot of people understand that. Again, all these formats here, the sealed Archon and Alliance, this is competitive format. It doesn't mean that at the store events, at the casual level, that you can't have all these crazy, fun, different events, and the stores are free to choose what is good for their local community. So that's something that people need to understand as well for that. And then lastly, the thing I want to talk about is that, so I talked about a lot of the negative notes here for what I think of the different formats. But this podcast here, the Library Access, a Keyforge podcast, their episode 9, actually talks about why this individual here thinks it's a really good format, and doesn't understand as much of the negativity towards it. He also says that no one wants to play reversal, which is a side note because I enjoy reversal. So hey, there's at least one. But this is a good one. This is a counter some of my points that I said. But if you listened all the way through, consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and also let me know in the comments what you think about the changes. Be nice to each other though in the comments. Don't get too meaning there, and let people have their views, right? So hopefully I gave some constructive feedback for that. Alliance, I can give or take it. But my main concern is actually with the sealed and Archon, and I do hope people do go to the Keyforge Celebration event. I'm jealous that I won't be able to make it. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and that you give honest feedback and constructive feedback for the three current formats in the game, and let me know how the second Amber events went. So this one's been a little bit longer, but hopefully you enjoyed it, and it gives you some insight for the tournaments that are coming up. And Keyforge is still back, and Winds of Exchange just is going to be around the corner, and I'm excited to do more videos covering it. That's all for now.